All right, so we're going to talk about module 1 today. Palo Altos, that's what we're getting started with here. Objectives for this week are going to be describing those 3 pillars of the Palo Alto Networks portfolio, understanding what single pass architecture is, zero concept of trust, and describe the physical and virtual Palos. So you'll notice as I do these recordings for this, I'm not a big PowerPoint junkie. Like, I'm not going to click on every single thing. My goal is to give you extra information that you wouldn't necessarily get in the reading content. So these are what is defined as their different points. So you have Strata, which is into their hybrids and their IoT points and securing the enterprise side. On the cloud side, they use their Prisma. And down here in Cortex, this is kind of their future, their detection response and threat intelligence, et cetera. The key elements that they talk about, you can see those on the screen, don't need to break up those. In securing that enterprise, there's a lot of different products within Palo Alto, more than just firewalls. So you have the Strata, the VM series, and the CN series. These are kind of the foundation of the network's portfolio. There's a bunch of different subscription services that you can do on your Palo Alto Networks firewall. These are like enhanced threat services, next generation firewall capabilities. We'll talk about those as we go through. You'll have Panorama, which we'll briefly cover. That is kind of the centralized management and logging of all Palo Altos. So if you have a massive enterprise, you probably run Panorama to manage all those firewall devices. Wildfire is your malware detection service, and it does it where it detects automatically and then prevents unknown threats. We'll have several labs on that. Global Protect is software that you install on laptops and mobile users of your network, and this is what extends that enterprise parameter and protection, making sure that they have credentials on there. We can even make sure that they have specific antivirus software and things like that installed, or we never even allow them to connect to our network. So it's pretty extensive with Global Protect. And then Prisma is very similar to that, where you access the entire site, not just the remote office or the remote PCs. All right. So Prisma software as a service can bring you some data protection. It's used for in the cloud side. You have Prisma Cloud, using to provide continuity service between security monitoring, et cetera, even if you're out in the Amazon web, Google, or Azure. Let's see here. Talking with the apps and services, we'll talk about Cortex in here and getting to the next generation firewall. So this is what most people set themselves apart with when you talk about firewalls. You have the old school firewall in one port, out the other port. We're protecting and basically just doing port blocking. It's what your guys' Netgears do at your house, or your Linksys, firewalls, routers that you have at your house. Basically just port blocking. In Palo Alto's side, you're going to do a whole lot more and dive a whole lot more deeper into that content. So we're actually going to do deep packet inspection and see what's actually trafficking there. We're not going to just say, oh, it's port 80 traffic, they must be browsing the web. Okay, we both know that you can do a whole lot more on port 80 than just browse the web. So in a single pass architecture, what we're going to do is let that traffic come in down here at the bottom. We're going to send it up through things like user ID, which we can have captive portals. We can have multi-factor authentication to authenticate them to go through our firewall. We can use app ID, in which we are detecting what kind of applications are going through here. So whether they're using Google Chat or they're using Facebook Chat, we can determine exactly what that is going through the packets, not just port 80 traffic or 443 traffic. And then content ID, we can also do data filtering, URL filtering, and real-time threat prevention. Passes up through the policy engine, then circles its way back down. So that is what they call their single pass architecture. From a firewall hardware architecture, you have a control plane, which is their management side. That's where you're configuring, logging, and reporting. That's where the RAM, the CPU, the SSD management console, or the actual serial console is available. Then you work in the data plane. So there's 2 separate planes. And the data plane is where we're going to do signature matching, security processing for all those app IDs that we talked about, breaking through SSL encryption, that kind of stuff is all going to be at the security level. And then we do the network processing, which is dealing with just routes, QoS, NAT, the simple things that you guys are normally used to. All right. When we talk about a zero trust architecture, that's where they always use the slogan, never trust, always verify, which means back in like Cisco, when you took those courses and such, we talked about the implicit deny at the end of everything, or an explicit deny. We are the same way. No traffic gets through our firewall unless we specifically tell it it can, which means we deny everything until we say this is allowed. So we will inspect perimeter traffic. You have inbound traffic, outbound. When you have traffic coming into a port, we can block it on the inbound or on the outbound of that same port. So we can block from incoming and outgoing, not just specifically to a particular port number. We can kick them over to the application zone, and then we can inspect internal traffic. So if you are going from one PC to another PC behind my firewall, it doesn't just immediately allow traffic. We can actually inspect that traffic even as it transverses the local LAN, which means we have to reroute all the traffic back through the firewall. Palo Alto, when it comes to firewalls, they're pretty much king. There's lots of different firewalls out there. I think we talked about that last week, whether it's Sonic walls, pfSense firewalls, etc. Palo Alto seems to be holding the top positions. And they offer a couple different ways of doing that. They have the hardware physical devices or physical appliances, which is their PA series. We have the software appliances, which will be their VM or CN series. And then we have their cloud services or Prisma, which is delivering that on X cloud service. On the PA side, we have 220s, which again, I was going to bring one of those in one of these days and we'll get to play with a little bit. You have the 400 series up to the 800 series. 800 series is kind of what I run NetLab behind. You get up into the 32s, 52s, the 7,000 being the big dogs. This is what we have here on campus that controls the entire campus firewall. Generally get towards the data center side. They also have some 5200 series for different concentrations and things coming in there as well. See, virtual systems. So we have separate logical firewalls within the same physical firewall. If you're familiar with Cisco routing, this is kind of like having their own routing tables and having virtual routing instances, which means you can do multiple routing tables within the same router. We can do that on the virtual side with firewalls. So instead of having one firewall for everything going through there, we can have multiple firewalls within the same device, which is slick because it allows us to have separate firewalls within the same physical one, allows us to create administrative boundary, and allows us to do multiple customers or departments with one firewall. So instead of me having to block off, accounting over here and HR over here, I can do it with one firewall, but I can route it in two separate instances. They would never see one another within that firewall. Within the VM series, it kind of tailors up. So you have the 700, the big dog. You'll notice that these perform exactly, if not better than some of the physical hardware, depending on what they're doing. And these are basically virtual machines that run on VMware at this point. You guys in this class will use the VM50s in the labs. You won't notice a difference in the UI or anything like that. The only thing that really changes is how many cores are running in the background, which means how many packets it can dedicate and send through at the same time. So a VM50 is capable of doing 200 meg worth of throughput and threat prevention at 100 meg. So even though you have a gig port, right, it can only analyze enough traffic in that particular virtual machine to do 200 meg worth of throughput, which is pretty good. 200 meg worth of throughput is pretty fast. That also means if I wanted to have a virtual machine handle this for my gig internet service from Nextech, I would have to have something like a VM100 in order to pull that off. All right, CN series, these are kind of the new ones. They provide visibility and security by using containerized application workloads. These are new within the 10.0 series. They natively integrate within Kubernetes clusters. How many of you guys are familiar with even the keyword Kubernetes, right? So Kubernetes clusters are a smaller form of virtualization than what you even do within VMware, right? VMware being basic, that you get clear down to the virtual machine and you get full control over what's going on in that VM. Kubernetes is going to be a lot like a small form of Docker. So you are actually taking one instance into the kernel and you're cloning out the versions of that kernel in Linux, and you can have multiple virtual machines within one machine that's there. It's basically based on containers, is what Kubernetes is. Really popular within SysOps right now is deploying Kubernetes clusters. Instead of me having to have a whole virtual machine dedicated to Apache, I can have one little container that runs Apache, one container that runs the MySQL servers and all of this. Docker being the one that most people are familiar with lately. Delivering those same capabilities as the PA and the VM series, it provides that layer 7 visibility, application layer segmentation, DNS, and all the good stuff, and protecting that traffic across trusted zones. So a lot of this deals with the cloud side, is why you're starting to see the CN series. All right, we also have the new K2 series, which is a next generation for 5G networks. Those are in order to achieve scalable, complete protection between everything in there. They have two modes. You have secure mode and express mode. Secure mode is going to come with all the next generation firewall settings and features, including threat prevention, IP-ID, IPS, antivirus, all the good stuff we're about to learn in here. All right. Prisma, we talked a little bit about that in the beginning. So Prism Access is secure access service edge. These are like the advanced expert level side of Palo Alto. So we're going to talk about them here so you're familiar with their products, but not something that we're going to dive deep into. These are typically some wide area network services that they're going to offer for cloud deliverage and convergence between business and the cloud. All right. That's the gist of this one. Again, no overview here, or no labs, I should say. And if you have questions, it'll end up telling us what that is. I don't know why this one had this question. Oh, I could give you review questions. You want review questions? We can do it. It'd be fun. So, which two planes are found in the Palo Alto Network single class platform architecture? Control, application, data, and parallel processing. Choose two of those. How about you fancy people online? Do you happen to know those answers? Lori, were you paying attention?
I was going to say the parallel processing.
And which other one?
I'm going to say data, but that's probably wrong.
All right, so it should be, I'm guessing, AC would be my chosen. And the reason I say AC is, remember, there's a control plane and a data plane. So when we talk about specific planes, that's these here where we have the control plane for management and the data plane over here, which does all this stuff in between. Fantastic guess. You are on the right path in that application processing is part of the data plane. All right. So that's what we'll do for the most part for these recordings. Let me stop the recording.